despite COVID-19, schools are faced with many challenges that may in fact disrupt teaching and learning this year. There are concerns of, for instance, over-crumbling infrastructure, overcrowded classrooms, and in fact the dangers that pit latrines, for instance, pose to pupils. Equal education researcher Jane Borman is with us now to unpack some of the other pressing issues around the academic year ahead. And Jane, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for making time. I wonder if we can begin by just unpacking what's happened so far since Equal Education and several other organizations, in fact, took the Education Department to court over the school nutrition program. That matter has been a hotbed issue, for lack of a better term. The courts actually compelled the Education Department to do right by pupils. COVID then happened, and that complicated the situation. What's your reading about how that program has fared since?
Thank you so much for having me. So basically, we took the MECs, the Ministers of Education in different provinces to court during the pandemic to enforce the National School Nutrition Program, which was stopped for many learners who were not attending school or who were not able to get to school to collect a food package. The court ruled in our favor to basically say that this is unconstitutional and that the provinces need to make a strong plan that enables all learners to receive the school meals that they're entitled to. We obviously want to monitor this closely in the new school year. There have still been many issues. We had to go back to court to compel some provinces to come up with a plan that was actually workable. So it's definitely something that we'll keep our eye on. The provinces are now ordered to do this, so it will now be a case of just making sure that they do it.
Yeah, and I guess for those who haven't placed the importance of the program into perspective yet, help us do exactly that, Jane. Why was this such an important issue for equal education, so much so that resources were put in place to take government to court over it?
Well, I think if you look at, obviously it was a vitally important program before COVID, but if you look at some of the research that has come out around hunger during COVID, you'll see that hunger dramatically, issues of hunger and obviously issues of increased poverty dramatically increased during COVID. For many learners, they were thrust into an even more precarious economic situation. And that meant making sure that they receive at least one full nutritious meal a day became even more important. Obviously, meals impact learning, not only just the development and well-being of the child. So learning from home brings a number of new challenges. And on top of that, learners were now having to go without one full meals a day. So that was deeply concerning to us.
Yeah, the challenges, of course, for the sector don't end there. We heard yesterday that I think it's upwards of 50 schools in Gauteng alone are facing various infrastructural problems. Those have been exacerbated by some of the storms we're seeing, but again, not a new issue facing the department. Are we making any headroad in tackling that?
So we are making overall very slow progress, but it just doesn't, the progress doesn't match up to the size and the importance of the issue. COVID, obviously, what we did see was we saw some emergency measures put in place at the beginning of the pandemic, but we really need to focus on ensuring that all schools have sustainable long-term access. We really cannot in 2022 have schools that still don't have any form of sanitation, schools that still don't have water, schools that still have pit latrines, which obviously are very dangerous and has seen the death of a number of pupils. Yeah. So, the South African Human Rights Commission has also come out to say that this is just simply unacceptable. And so there is progress being made, but it's too slow and not at an acceptable standard.
Right. Let's speaking about progress, about whether or not rotational learning is the kind of system we can rely upon moving forward. There's a great debate now about whether or not it's even necessary, but when we think about the loss of learning time, how high up your list of concerns is that as equal education?
Oh, very, very, very high. Yeah. And again, what you see is COVID-19 exacerbated a number of issues. It exacerbated the issues of school infrastructure, making the fact that some schools didn't have water all the more damaging. But it also exacerbated the inequalities in schools, particularly that learners who have responsibilities at home, perhaps financial responsibilities, or a home environment where it's harder to work in. Rotational learning is that much more difficult. So what you have is you have some learners who lost, say, 50% of, this rough estimate, but in 2020, 50% of school days, but lost 70% of actual learning because, going to school 3 times a week and then being unable to study properly at home and being unable to revise at home means that the learning losses are huge. So we understand the necessity of rotational timetabling, but the impact of learners is very, very, very worrying, especially as the pandemic draws on. So you'll have pupils who have spent a number of years not being able to cover the full curriculum or not being able to have sufficient learning time to catch up on the whole curriculum.
Yes.
So it's definitely something that is of great concern and something that we'll need to watch moving forward.
Plenty to keep our eye on. Jane Borman, thanks very much indeed for helping us do exactly that. Jane is a researcher with Equal Education.